Class is entitled The Revolutionary Kingdom Declarations. What we're studying is the Sermon on the Mount. It's a remarkable study. As we've seen, there is quite a bit of depth to this, and we're trying to explore some of the depth of that. We're coming to understand that Jesus in this sermon is really focusing on righteousness. So where we've gone so far is that we've looked at that introduction of the Beatitudes, and we saw that there were three triads of these Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor, those that mourn, the gentle, and we find here that Jesus is making some really interesting declarations about the kind of people that have found the way to thrive in life. And so that is really an upside-down way of looking at life. We went on from there to talk about the metaphors of salt, light, and that city set on a hill, and how Jesus is describing that when we come to the kingdom, citizens of the kingdom become salt as he is salt, and become light as he is light, and we become the shining beacon of that sheds light of the gospel upon all of the Gentiles and all of the world. We come to the formal body of the sermon in this next phrase, and we've been looking at this verse and describing it as really the theme of the entire Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, "For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not or never enter the kingdom of heaven." And so that would be quite a shocking statement. We find that the Sermon on the Mount is full of shocking, unexpected statements, revolutionary ideas, and it is really a matter of the people coming to look at these things and just be wide-eyed at the pronouncements that Jesus is making during this. We looked at this quote from the book that Paul Earnhardt wrote to kind of establish the tone for this section, where Jesus is really going after the scribes and Pharisees. He's letting us know and letting his kingdom know that things are not the way you may think they are. The ones that appear to be the most pious, the most righteous, the most fervent in their expressions of their faith and their religion and their understanding of the Torah, the law, you've got to do better than that. And that's a shocking statement, to think that these are the ones that are the most respected among the elite of society. And yet, as Paul describes in his book, these are the kinds of people who are expressing a type of righteousness that must be blasted away. And that their version of righteousness will never get us to the point where Jesus would have his citizens, his kingdom citizens be. And so we've got to get beyond that. We've got to get deeper than that. I told a little parable about the Pharisees a few weeks ago, talking about going out into my garden, my herb garden, and picking some mint tea leaves because I wanted a cup of mint tea. And as a Pharisee, I go out there and I only need like 3 leaves for my mint tea. But I'm thinking about, wait a second. I need to remember the tithe. I need to remember the tenth. So how am I going to, after I harvest my leaves, how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to have to pick 10 leaves. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick these 10 leaves. That way I can easily make my tithe of the 1 mint leaf into the temple treasury. In fact, that is the best way of thinking about how I'm going to harvest this small amount, and I'm going to share that with my brothers and sisters when I go to synagogue. So I'm going into the synagogue and I'm sharing this information with my brothers and sisters. And I'm saying, I got up this morning and I decided to have some mint tea. And rather than getting the 3 little mint leaves, I decided what I need is to pick 10. That way I can do the tithe appropriately. And you might be kind of impressed with the thoughtfulness of this guy. And that's how the Pharisees were. They thought about these things a lot. The application of the Torah was embedded in every part of their life. And there's something about that that is really admirable until we realize what the Pharisees did. Not only does this Pharisee do that himself, but he takes that to the synagogue and says, look at what I've done. Look at how well I'm doing this. And not only look at how well I'm doing this, this is the way you're going to have to harvest your mint. When you go and get your leaves for your tea in the morning, you need to do it this way too. And if you don't do that, then you're in violation of the Torah. We're going to make that the law right now. This is the only way we can apply the principles of giving the tithe of your harvest. You must harvest a minimum of 10 leaves. And you must bring that tenth into the treasury. That's how the Pharisees operated. And then, beyond that, they started monitoring their brethren and their mint tea leaves. How's your mint in your garden looking? By the way, have you harvested lately? And are you tithing appropriately? And let me guess, you didn't tithe like you were supposed to. And so you stand condemned. So the impulse of the Pharisee is to not only take great pains in the application of the Torah, but in the application of these personal things, they would take pains in asserting them and pushing them upon others, binding them, and then elevating their conclusions, their interpretations of the Torah to an equal status with the Torah itself, so that if you do not comply with my understanding of that, then you're in violation of the Torah itself. They have become equals. And Jesus is tearing this down. He's eliminating this. And he's doing away with that. And so he begins talking about what it means to be righteous. Unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. And then he goes on to talk about, I did not come to destroy the Torah, to tear down the law, to abolish it, but to fulfill. And so in this next section, as he starts giving these examples, we're calling them case studies. He's giving us examples of how the Torah is being fulfilled in reality in the lives of the kingdom citizens. This is the true manifestation of the fulfillment of the law. And so when it comes to this first triad, we've grouped these together: murder, adultery, and divorce. And we say that there's a lot of common themes across this. And what we've discovered as we think about this is that these are things that get to the heart of human dignity. Respect for the fact that God has placed his image on every member of humanity. And since God has done that, that is a sacred act in which we must honor God's decision to make humanity in this way by treating others with that kind of sacred dignity that God placed upon them. And that's true when it comes to murder. You can't, upon yourself, take it to be the evaluator of the worth of a human being and say, you don't deserve to live in this world. I'm just going to erase you from this world. You can't do that. But not only that, Jesus says, not only that, when you become enraged with your brother to the point that you want to kill him, even if you don't kill him, you're guilty before the same court. And if you have a contemptuous insult for your brother, he says you're guilty before the Supreme Court, or the Sanhedrin, the greatest court of the land. And then he says this lesser insult, calling somebody a fool, you're guilty before God's court, the biggest court of all. And we notice that completely turns upside down the accepted ethics of humanity. Is it just as bad to call somebody an idiot as it is to murder them? The way Jesus describes it, it's worse. It's not really, right? But the point that Jesus is making is this comes from the same place. Yes, Miss Phillips.
I just want to tell you, this part of this class has really impressed me because every time this week that I wanted to call somebody an idiot, I had to stop and think, that is not right. So
Jesus has assaulted all of us with this truth. I think that you're not the only one, Phyllis, who's feeling. I am feeling the discomfort of this as well. And that's the right approach. Jesus intended for us to have this kind of discomfort. I mean, he gets into the meat of the sermon, and once he starts talking about violence and sex. I mean, I'm already uncomfortable.
In all three cases, he goes to the foundation of the problem.
Exactly.
And straight.
Exactly. The heart of the problem.
But he always does.
And he does this all the time. You're right. He always does this. So there's no superficiality with Jesus. No superficiality at all. Yes, Steve?
It seems like this is a tree. You know, the rage that causes murder, that's the fruit of having these kinds of thought. And the contemptuous insult, that's the tree maturing before it gets to fruit. The lesser insult, that's the seed. And he's trying to get it to the point, let's stamp this out before it grows.
Excellent. Excellent. So we've got to go further. Some people describe it as going further upstream. But the point is, yeah, it's the heart. It is the heart that is at issue with all of these issues, all of these discussions. And so when he talks about murder, he's talking about contempt for humanity. We've got to be careful about placing ourselves in that position of arrogance where we can view another with contempt and we can call them whatever we want. That is beneath the dignity of humanity, every human. But if you're a kingdom of the citizen of heaven, you need to understand you're a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. Did I say those words in correct order? All right. Steve, could you edit that for me? Okay. On the video. All right. So it is the disposition of the heart that Jesus is concerned about. And so we come to that second one, this concept of adultery. He comes to this another one of the Ten Commandments. You've heard it said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you, everyone who looks on a woman to lust after her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. He goes on to say, if your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out, throw it from you, for it's better that one of the members of your body perish than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand makes you stumble, cut it off and throw it from you, for it's better that one of the parts of your body perish than for your whole body to go into hell. Jesus uses this word hell a lot. If we have time, I want to do a study of that, but we're not going to do that today. But if you have interest in that, let me know, and we'll dedicate some time to it since we have some time now. Those of you who are not aware, we have decided to extend this class into another quarter. we're going to take a break in the summer, and then we're going to continue in the fall. So we have some time to explore some of these concepts a little bit deeper. All right. Cut out your eye, cut off your hand. Does that solve the problem here?
Not unless you get to the heart.
Yeah. I believe Jesus is using hyperbole. He's using an exaggerated statement, shocking statement, really. Here we go again. Jesus is full of these shocking statements to wake us up to the importance of these issues. There's a few things I want to say about that. But the first thing is, cutting off your hand and plucking out your eye does not really solve the real problem, because he's already identified this as a problem of the heart. We've noticed that Jesus is dealing with this in a male-centric way. He lived in a male-dominated, centered society. And he's addressing the men here about your tendency to look upon a woman and to objectify her. But this goes back, I keep going back to Genesis. We did that with murder, talking about the anger of Cain and Abel. Cain against Abel. He was angry with his brother and he killed him. When God created Adam and Eve in the garden, they lived there naked without shame. There was no shame. God gave them to one another, and they were blessed to have each other and to live in intimacy with one another in that way, and that was a beautiful thing. Some of the critics of Jesus and his teaching look at this passage and they say, Jesus didn't like sex. He thought that sex was dirty. He thinks that sex is something really that is just of this world, and it's really beneath the dignity of his spiritual creatures to place so much importance on sex. That's what the critics of Jesus would say about these verses. But I want you to flip that perspective a bit. Isn't it possible that what Jesus is doing here is describing the sexual relationship with such importance and with such sacredness, in a sense, that he honors it and extols its virtue to a point that it must be protected. And the covenant of marriage, the abstaining from adultery, is so critical to our progress as citizens of the kingdom that Jesus describes these exaggerated efforts that we would go to prevent that from happening. And again, Steve, the way you're describing that is so true. Adultery doesn't just happen out of the blue. There is a seed that is planted in the heart of an individual before that covenant is broken. And that is, again, the point that Jesus is getting at. And again, we see him dealing with human dignity. You don't treat other people as just objects. You don't treat other people as, just something for your satisfaction or for your fantasy. Go back to the garden again. Eve, saw that fruit. And Eve desired that because it looked good. And Eve took it. Right? Saw, desired, took. Saw with the eye, desired in the heart, took with the hand. Is it a coincidence here that Jesus is talking about hands and eyes as part of this process? We think about the eye as just really something that's indispensable to our life. Nobody wants to go through life without their eyes that function well so they can navigate life and do things well. Nobody wants to go through life maimed, having their hand cut off. But when you abuse the position that God has put you in by seeing, desiring, and taking, even if, in the case of adultery, you do not literally take this woman, Jesus said, you've taken something in your heart. In your heart. And I want to say something here. This is a big problem. It's a big problem not only privately with men, because this affects everything about that righteous relationship that you have with people. When men perceive women as objects, that spills over into so many other facets of life. How we treat women, how we respect women, how we honor women. Here we are on Mother's Day. Of all things, this is a great topic. It's uncomfortable to talk about, and I'm sorry. But it does impact us, and our society reflects that. And I don't know if I should do this. I'm gonna try to show you a video right now. A video you may have seen or you may not have seen. It's been in the news. Let me see if I can do this without too many problems. This is a preacher
Go to those places with shorts,
talking about the
if
dress
you will,
of women.
women with pants and dresses put together. Try it. If you got time, try it. Have your boy go up there and try it. Just watch for it. Have your girl go up there and watch for it. And you know, I used to say this. I haven't said this in a long time. You ready? I said, if you dress like that and you get raped, and I'm on the jewelry, he's going to go free. You don't like, do you?
No, I don't.
I'm right, though. I can't help you like I'm right. Because, you know, a man's a man.
Okay.
Y'all like that?
No.
He was right. You don't like it.
And he was also wrong.
And he was wrong.
Yeah.
He has since apologized, just to be fair. But this is a symptom. This is a symptom of what Jesus is talking about here. Failure to understand the dignity of women. When Jesus talks about this issue, what does he say the problem is? The heart of who? The heart of the looker. Jesus doesn't say, now, this problem could just be fixed if women would behave in a different way.
And wear a hijab.
Jesus doesn't say, if women would just cover themselves with more clothing, this problem could go away. Jesus doesn't say, if we could just remove women from the room where we are, then men can focus on what they need to focus on. That is not what Jesus says. Now, Jesus will deal with women and the way that they dress. And Paul will deal with that in some of his epistles. But Jesus says the problem here is not with the women. The problem here is with the man and his heart. And when a man does not have the proper amount of dignity in his heart and conveying that toward women, you end up with this type of attitude where if she gets raped, it's her fault. I don't think Jesus agrees with that at all. Based on what he says here, men, you need to take whatever drastic measures are necessary for you to have the right demeanor toward women. If that means as much as doing without what you would consider to be an indispensable part of your body, then that's what you need to do. Jesus says this is serious. This is not a small matter. But do you see how having that shapes our culture in a different way and makes people, even religious people, even people who spend time studying the Bible, come up with a warped imagination of what that relationship should look like? Oh, yeah, well, like I said, I don't know if that was a good thing to show or not to show, but I was shocked by that statement, and I hope that you were shocked by that as well. Men need to train their hearts and understand that this is not just a private matter. It is going to shape the way that you think about this fellow image bearer of yours. And so the stakes of this are huge. And so, again, Jesus may be using hyperbolic language here. But what he's saying is this is super important. Yeah, Ben.
I work around people, like most people do. And somebody will swear or say something, and I'll say, hey, there's ladies present. And what's the first thing the ladies say? Oh, that's okay. We do that too. So then I say, not around me. That's not okay. Because if they want a further explanation, is how you allow people to treat you is how they will respect you. And how they talk about you is part of that. So that's along the lines of what you're saying too.
Yeah. So Jesus does not have, my point, I think that I started making somewhere along the way here, he doesn't have a very low valuation of sex. He holds it with such high esteem and such dignity. He considers it to be vitally sacred and extremely important and honorable to the point that we would take great measures to protect ourselves from abusing it. And so that is the point that he's making here, that we hold it in high esteem. All right. You all want to move on from this one? Yeah, me too. No, it doesn't. Go ahead.
I went over to John 5 where Jesus healed the man at the pool. And it's like, he couldn't steal. He wasn't hurting anybody. He wasn't doing this. He wasn't doing that. And then he was healed, and he comes back later, and Jesus says to him, stop sinning or something worse will happen to you. So even though he was in that condition, he had a heart problem just the same.
Yeah. All right, so let's introduce then this next topic of divorce. Verse 31 and 32. And it was said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of dismissal. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except for the cause of unchastity, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. So Jesus is going to another commandment. This is not one of the 10, but it is a commandment from Deuteronomy 24, and it's rather obscure. What in the world, Jesus? Are you plucking something out of Deuteronomy 4 that really doesn't have a great deal of information around it and context? Well, let's just go back to Deuteronomy 24, and let's just read that together, and we'll just begin to introduce this topic. Deuteronomy 24, verse 1. When a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out from his house. And she leaves his house and goes and becomes another man's wife. If the latter husband turns against her and writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house, or if the latter husband dies who took her to be his wife, then her former husband who sent her away is not allowed to take her again to be his wife, since she has been defiled. For this is an abomination before the Lord. Okay. Well, that's a little confusing. Do you find that confusing?
This was on my list of things to ask you sometime, because I read this and I went back and looked this up and I said, okay, I need some explanation on this. 'Cause it's,
Yeah, you're not the only one. Yes.
So teach us.
So,
because this seems like a very narrow case.
okay. Well, don't you wish Moses would have kind of expounded upon that a little bit and said, for example, or let's talk about, well, but he doesn't. Not anywhere in the Torah is there more information than what I just read. That's it. And so the application of that, you might think, well, this has to do with human relationships, and do you think that this was not a controversial subject in Jesus' day? Oh, it was. It was. And what Jesus is doing now, he's wading into the deep end of the controversy. This was something that was debated furiously and feverishly in the first century, in Jesus' day. Jesus is not afraid of the controversy. He goes right out into it. And this isn't the only place that we find Jesus addressing. He addresses it again in this same book in Matthew 19 with a little bit more information. Yeah, Gary.
My first question is, what's the heart of the first husband that he got rid of her because she's not any good, and all of a sudden she is?
Yeah.
Was it so shallow that it wasn't real?
Yeah, I've got questions too, Gary. I've got questions myself. And as you can imagine, when you have something that is so ambiguous as these words, and you have people who are intensely focused on the law, the Pharisees, and they're going to read that, and then somebody's going to say, well, here's what I get out of that.
Mint leaves.
But it's explicit. But it's
No,
explicit.
seriously, you take the mint leaf heart into something like that?
Yeah.
For people that needed explicit instruction.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, the rabbis of Jesus' day were divided about what this meant. Believe it or not, they were divided. There were at least two very large camps of feeling about what this verse meant. So, the camp of Shammai, he had his own school, he was a famous rabbi. He says, when you read those words, he finds some indecency in her. And literally, the literal words used there, there's some nakedness of some matter, which is rather ambiguous. Nakedness of some matter. They said, well, what he's talking about here is a violation, it can't be right, Steve, the violation of the covenant of marriage, a sexual relation, the nakedness of some matter. So they took that very conservative position that this woman has committed adultery. She's broken the covenant vow. The school of Hillel, on the other hand, said, no. He finds something wrong with her. This is a male-dominated society, remember? And so much so that only a man could initiate a divorce. Women could not initiate a divorce. And so if you're a disciple in the school of Hillel, the conclusion that you reach is, well, if you find some problem with her, whether it be that you don't like the way that she cooks, or that you just happen to be attracted to a different person, more so than she, you give her that certificate of divorce and send her away, and she can go on to her next marriage. And so that was the two large sides that were constantly debating. And so when you go over to Matthew 19, the circumstances of the question are quite different, and we'll get there, but I'm out of time, and I just wanted to introduce this so that we can begin rolling with this next week. I'm sorry I didn't even give you an opportunity to talk about the assignment, if anybody wanted to share that. So hold that again for next week. Remind me early on in class, and we'll have that opportunity. But our time is finished today. Thank you for your attention and comments.